What are you doing freezing outside?
Please, can I come in for just one night?
The wind howled through the empty streets of Greenwich, Connecticut, carrying thick sheets of snow that blurred everything in sight. Streetlights glowed faintly through the storm, barely lighting the frozen sidewalks. Annie Carter pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself, but it did little to stop the cold. Snow covered her worn sneakers, and every step felt heavier than the last. Her fingers were numb. Her stomach ached from hunger. She had nowhere left to go. Only hours earlier she had fled the small apartment she shared with Marcus Reed, a man who had promised to protect her after her mother's death, but had slowly turned into the greatest danger in her life. Marcus controlled everything. Her money, her identification, her phone, even the few dreams she still carried. Whenever she talked about finishing school or finding a better job, Marcus laughed. "You belong where I say you belong," he would remind her. Tonight had been different. When Annie refused to hand over the paycheck she had secretly earned, cleaning offices downtown, Marcus exploded with rage. He grabbed her wrist so hard it bruised, accused her of planning to leave him, and demanded every dollar she had. The moment he turned toward the kitchen, Annie ran. She didn't stop to grab her backpack. She didn't take a coat. She simply ran into the freezing night. Now she wandered through unfamiliar neighborhoods, shivering beneath the falling snow, wondering if freedom had been a terrible mistake. Her legs trembled with exhaustion. She hadn't eaten since early that morning. The snow continued to fall harder. For the first time since escaping, fear gave way to doubt. Maybe Marcus had been right. Maybe she couldn't survive on her own. As she stumbled around another corner, a large iron gate appeared through the snow. Beyond it stood one of the largest homes she had ever seen. Warm, golden lights glowed through tall windows. Smoke drifted peacefully from the chimney. It looked less like a house and more like something from a movie. Annie hesitated. People who lived in homes like that usually called security before opening their doors. Still, if she stayed outside much longer, the cold might make the decision for her. Gathering what little courage she had left, Annie pushed open the unlocked pedestrian gate and slowly walked toward the mansion. Every step left fresh footprints behind her. She climbed the wide stone staircase and stared at the enormous front door. Her hand shook as she reached for the brass knocker. She almost turned around. Instead, knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the quiet house. For several long seconds, nothing. Then the door slowly opened. Standing inside was an elderly black woman wearing a gray sweater and a white apron. Her silver hair was neatly tied back, and kindness filled her eyes long before she spoke. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "You've been standing out there in this weather?" Annie lowered her head. "I'm sorry for bothering you. My bus never came. It was a lie. A small one, but easier than explaining the truth." The woman studied her for a moment. Snow covered Annie's shoulders. Her lips were turning blue. Her hands shook uncontrollably. "You need to come inside." Before Annie could answer, a calm but firm voice echoed from deeper inside the house. "Evelyn." The older woman looked over her shoulder. A tall man entered the foyer. Even with a cane, he carried himself with quiet authority. His tailored suit fit perfectly. His silver hair was neatly combed. Everything about him suggested discipline, wealth, and complete control. Nathaniel Whitmore, one of Connecticut's most respected business leaders. His eyes immediately landed on Annie. Then on the snow collecting beneath her feet, his expression hardened. "Who is she?" "A young woman caught in the storm," Evelyn answered. Nathaniel looked Annie up and down. "Has anyone called the police?" Annie quickly stepped backward. "No, sir. I'll leave. I shouldn't have come." She turned toward the door. The freezing wind rushed inside before Evelyn gently caught Annie's arm. "You'll freeze before you reach the gate," Nathaniel sighed. "This house isn't a shelter." "I understand," Annie whispered. "I was only hoping to stay until the storm passed." Nathaniel remained silent. His eyes never left hers. Something about the girl unsettled him. Not because she looked dangerous, because she looked familiar. Not her face, her expression. It reminded him of someone he had spent years trying to forget. He pushed the thought away immediately. "No," the single word landed heavily in the room. "I'm sorry," he continued, "but strangers don't stay here." Annie nodded slowly. "I understand." She stepped back into the snow. The icy wind instantly wrapped around her again. She took only a few steps before dizziness overwhelmed her. Her knees buckled. She collapsed onto the snowy walkway. Evelyn gasped. Nathaniel! Without thinking, Nathaniel hurried outside despite the cold. He knelt beside Annie. Snowflakes covered her eyelashes. Her skin was freezing. She barely responded when he called her name. Evelyn looked at him with disappointment. She's not asking for your fortune. She's asking to survive the night. Nathaniel stared at the unconscious young woman. For a moment, the image before him changed. Instead of Annie, he remembered his little daughter, Grace, years ago. Cold, helpless, gone before he could save her. The memory struck him harder than the winter wind. He closed his eyes, then quietly said the words he hadn't expected to say. Bring her inside. Evelyn didn't hesitate. Together, they lifted Annie and carried her into the warmth of the mansion. As the heavy front doors closed behind them, neither of them realized that this frightened young woman had just stepped into a house that would change all of their lives forever. Warmth slowly returned to Annie's body. She opened her eyes to find herself lying in a soft bed beneath thick blankets. A fire crackled quietly across the room, replacing the howl of the winter wind she had heard only moments before. For a second, she thought she was dreaming. The room was simple but elegant. A lamp glowed on the bedside table. Fresh clothes had been folded neatly on a chair. The smell of chicken soup drifted through the partially open door. Then reality returned. She wasn't home. She wasn't with Marcus, and she had no idea where she belonged. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Evelyn stepped inside carrying a tray with steaming soup, fresh bread, and a mug of tea. There you are, she said with a warm smile. I was beginning to think you'd sleep until tomorrow. Annie quickly tried to sit up. I'm sorry. Evelyn chuckled. You've apologized more than you've spoken. Annie lowered her eyes. I'm just not used to people helping me. Evelyn placed the tray on the bed. Then it's time you got used to it. The smell alone made Annie's stomach ache. She hesitated. Evelyn noticed. When was the last time you ate? Annie looked embarrassed. This morning. Evelyn frowned. That was nearly 12 hours ago. Annie nodded without speaking. Eat. The first spoonful nearly brought tears to her eyes. It wasn't expensive food. It wasn't fancy. But it was hot, safe, made for her. She hadn't experienced that feeling since her mother was alive. Across the hall, Nathaniel stood inside his study staring out at the snow-covered gardens. He wasn't reading the business reports spread across his desk. His thoughts kept returning to the young woman sleeping upstairs. Daniel Price, his longtime attorney and closest advisor, entered quietly. I hear you've adopted a new habit, Daniel said. Nathaniel looked over. What habit? Bringing strangers home. Nathaniel gave him a dry look. I didn't. Evelyn did. Daniel smiled, and yet you were the one who carried her inside. Nathaniel said nothing. Daniel walked to the window. Who is she? I don't know. That bothers you. It should bother anyone. Daniel folded his arms. Or perhaps it reminds you of something. Nathaniel's face hardened. Leave Grace out of this. Silence settled over the room. Daniel sighed. I'm sorry. Nathaniel's voice softened. I spent years convincing myself that shutting people out would protect what's left of me. Daniel looked at his old friend. Has it? Nathaniel stared at the snow. No. Nearly 15 miles away. Marcus Reed slammed his fist against a kitchen table. The apartment looked as if a storm had passed through it. Drawers hung open, closets had been emptied. He had searched every corner. Annie was gone. A younger man sat nervously across from him. You think she'll go to the police? Marcus laughed bitterly. No. I made sure she'd never trust them. He grabbed his phone and scrolled through Annie's contacts. Most had been deleted months ago. Just as he intended, she had nowhere to go. No family, no money, no identification. Marcus smiled. She's scared. And scared people always come back. But even as he said it, a small part of him wondered if this time was different. The next morning, Annie woke before sunrise. Years of survival had trained her body to expect work before daylight. She carefully made the bed, folded the blankets, straightened everything she had touched. Then she quietly walked downstairs. The mansion was almost silent. She wandered into the kitchen. Evelyn was already there, humming softly while preparing breakfast. Morning, Evelyn said. You sleep all right? Yes, ma'am. I wasn't sure if I should come downstairs. You live under my roof. You don't need permission to eat breakfast. Annie froze. The words sounded foreign. Permission. She had asked for permission to do everything for years. Marcus had made sure of that. Evelyn placed bacon, eggs, toast, and fruit on the table. Annie stared at the meal. It's too much. It's breakfast. It's more food than I've seen in days. Evelyn's smile faded. Without another word, she filled Annie's plate. Annie whispered a quiet prayer before eating. Evelyn noticed. So your mama taught you that too? Annie nodded. She used to say food tastes different after you've thanked God. What else did she teach you? Annie smiled for the first time. That soup can hold a family together when money can't. Evelyn laughed softly. I think I would have liked your mother. I think she would have liked you too. Nathaniel entered the kitchen just as Annie finished eating. She immediately stood. I'm sorry. I was about to clean everything. Nathaniel glanced at her untouched cup of tea. You don't have to earn breakfast. She looked confused. I wasn't trying to. You were. He spoke without accusation. Sit. She obeyed. Nathaniel poured himself coffee before taking the seat across from her. I've asked Daniel to replace your identification. Annie blinked. My ID? Your social security documents, birth certificate, school records. We'll recover what we can. She stared at him. You'd really do that? You'll need them. Tears threatened to form again. I don't know how to repay you. Nathaniel shook his head. You don't. She looked away. People always expected something in return. Always. His answer didn't make sense. Later that afternoon, Daniel returned with paperwork and a brand new prepaid phone. It's temporary, he explained, but at least you'll have a way to call for help. Annie held the phone carefully, almost afraid to touch it. It's mine? Daniel smiled. Yes. No tracking, no hidden passwords, no one monitoring your calls. Her eyes filled with tears again. She had forgotten what freedom felt like. Across town, Marcus was losing patience. He had searched shelters, hospitals, bus stations, nothing. Then his phone rang. A private investigator he occasionally used for debt collection spoke quietly. I may have something. Marcus stood immediately. What? A young black woman matching her description was seen entering the Whitmore estate during the snowstorm. Marcus's smile slowly returned. Nathaniel Whitmore? The billionaire? That's the one. Marcus's eyes narrowed. So, that's where you've been hiding. He slipped his coat on. This just became interesting. As he walked toward the door, he whispered to himself, You can't hide from me forever, Annie. That evening, Nathaniel stood alone in the music room. A dusty piano rested near the fireplace. He hadn't touched it since Grace died. As he stared at it, he heard faint laughter from the hallway. Annie and Evelyn were talking in the kitchen. It was a small sound, ordinary, yet it echoed through the empty mansion like sunlight breaking through years of darkness. Nathaniel realized something he hadn't expected. For the first time in years, the house no longer sounded completely empty. He didn't know whether that comforted him or frightened him. The next few days settled into an unexpected routine. For Annie, it felt almost unreal. Each morning she woke before everyone else, helped Evelyn prepare breakfast, and insisted on washing dishes no matter how many times Evelyn told her to leave them alone. You don't have to work for every meal, Evelyn reminded her one morning. Annie smiled politely but kept drying the plates. I know. The truth was, she didn't know. For years Marcus had made her believe that kindness always came with a price. If someone gave you a place to sleep, you paid them back. If someone fed you, you owed them. Gratitude had become a debt she never seemed able to repay. Nathaniel noticed it too. Every time Annie passed him in the hallway, she apologized, even when she had done nothing wrong. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I didn't mean to bother you. By the end of the week, he had heard those words dozens of times. One afternoon, he finally stopped her. Miss Carter? She froze. Yes, sir? You apologize too much. She looked confused. I do? You've apologized for walking, for eating, for breathing too loudly. Annie lowered her eyes. I guess I'm used to staying out of people's way. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. No one should have to live like that. Those simple words stayed with Annie long after he walked away. Later that afternoon, Daniel arrived carrying a thick folder. I've been digging into Marcus Reed, he said as he entered Nathaniel's study. Nathaniel closed the report he had been reading. What did you find? Enough to make me wish I'd found him sooner. Daniel opened the file. Marcus has a history of fraud, assault complaints, illegal debt collection, and coercion. Most charges were dropped because witnesses disappeared or refused to testify. Nathaniel frowned. And Annie? Daniel slid another document across the desk. Everything she told us checks out. Nathaniel read quietly. After Annie's mother died from cancer, Marcus convinced her he would help manage the funeral expenses and handle her paperwork. Instead, he took control of her life. He emptied the small savings her mother had left behind. He kept Annie's identification locked away. He intercepted her mail. Whenever she found work, he demanded her paycheck. When she resisted, he threatened her. Nathaniel slowly closed the folder. So she wasn't running from poverty. Daniel nodded. She was escaping captivity. Silence filled the room. Nathaniel looked toward the window where Annie was helping Evelyn scatter birdseed across the snowy garden. She laughed as a flock of sparrows landed nearby. It was the first genuine laugh he had heard from her. You know, Daniel said quietly, she reminds me of someone. Nathaniel answered without taking his eyes off the window. I know. Outside, Annie smiled as birds gathered around her boots. My mama loved feeding birds, she said. Evelyn smiled. Mine too. They never cared how much money you had. Annie nodded. They only cared whether you were gentle. Evelyn looked at her carefully. You miss her every day. I miss the way she made every place feel like home. She hesitated. After she died, every house just became somewhere to survive. Evelyn reached over and squeezed her hand. Maybe one day you'll stop surviving and start living. Before Annie could answer, the sound of tires crunching through snow echoed beyond the front gate. A black SUV slowed near the entrance. It didn't stop, it simply rolled past. Neither woman noticed the man inside watching the mansion. Marcus Reed. He had found her. Marcus parked half a mile away and raised a pair of binoculars. There she was, alive, smiling, laughing, his jaw tightened. So that's how it is. He watched Annie walk back inside beside Evelyn. She looked different, safer. That angered him more than he expected. No, he muttered. She belongs with me. He pulled out his phone and made a call. A familiar voice answered. Carl Jensen speaking. Marcus smiled. I hear you're still working security for the Whitmore estate. Carl's voice became cautious. Who's asking? Someone willing to pay very well. That evening, Carl sat alone inside the estate's security office, staring at his phone. He had worked for Nathaniel Whitmore for nearly 8 years. Nathaniel trusted him, paid him well, respected him. But Marcus had offered him $50,000, just to leave one service gate unlocked for 10 minutes. Carl rubbed his forehead. It isn't stealing. It isn't hurting anyone. I'm just opening a gate. He tried convincing himself. But deep down, he already knew he was making the worst decision of his life. Inside the mansion, Annie wandered into the greenhouse behind the house. It was beautiful. Even in winter, colorful flowers bloomed beneath the glass ceiling. The warm air smelled of fresh soil and roses. Nathaniel found her standing beside a small white orchid. My wife planted that one. Annie turned. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Nathaniel stepped beside her. Eleanor believed flowers reminded people that winters never last forever. Annie smiled softly. She sounds wonderful. She was. They stood quietly for a moment. Then Annie asked, Do you ever stop missing people? Nathaniel answered honestly, No. You simply learn to carry them differently. Annie nodded. I hope I learn that someday. You will. Neither of them noticed someone watching from outside the greenhouse. Carl. He checked his watch. 7 minutes until Marcus arrived. His hands trembled. He looked toward the service gate, then toward the house. For a brief moment, he almost changed his mind. Almost. Instead, he unlocked the gate. The latch clicked softly in the cold evening air. A black SUV rolled silently through the opening. Marcus stepped out wearing a dark coat, his eyes fixed on the glowing greenhouse. A cruel smile spread across his face. There you are. He walked toward the glass building without making a sound. Inside, Annie was still talking with Nathaniel, completely unaware that the man she feared most had just entered the property. The greenhouse was peaceful. Outside, snow drifted gently across the gardens. Inside, the warm air carried the scent of roses and fresh earth. Nathaniel and Annie stood near Eleanor's favorite orchids. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, Annie looked completely at ease. Then a voice shattered the silence. There you are. Every bit of color drained from Annie's face. She knew that voice. Marcus Reed stepped through the greenhouse door with a smug smile, brushing snow from his coat as if he had been invited. Nathaniel immediately stepped in front of Annie. "You shouldn't be here." Marcus ignored him. His eyes stayed locked on Annie. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Annie instinctively took a step backward. "I'm not going with you." Marcus laughed. "You don't get to decide that." Nathaniel's voice became colder. "Leave my property." Marcus finally looked at him. "So you're the billionaire?" "I expected someone smarter." Nathaniel didn't react. "You entered private property without permission. I'm asking you once. Leave." Marcus smiled. "And if I don't?" Before Nathaniel could answer, Marcus suddenly lunged toward Annie. He grabbed her wrist. "You've embarrassed me long enough." Annie cried out in pain. "No." Nathaniel moved faster than anyone expected. Using his cane for balance, he shoved Marcus away from her. Marcus stumbled into a flower bench, knocking over several pots. "So that's how it's gonna be?" Marcus growled. He swung at Nathaniel. The older man blocked the blow, but the impact forced him backward. Annie rushed between them. "Stop!" Marcus reached for her again. Before he could touch her, 2 security officers burst into the greenhouse. "Carl called us," one shouted. Marcus looked surprised. "Hi?" But Carl hadn't called them. Another employee had noticed Marcus entering through the service gate and immediately alerted security. Within seconds, Marcus found himself surrounded. Nathaniel looked directly at him. "You're finished," Marcus sneered. "You think you've won? This isn't over." As security escorted him toward the gate, Marcus turned back toward Annie. "You'll come crawling back." "You always do." Annie stood frozen. Nathaniel gently placed himself between her and Marcus until the man disappeared from view. Only then did Annie begin shaking. Nathaniel looked at her bruised wrist. "It's over." She stared at the floor. "No, it never feels over." An hour later, Detective Laura Hayes arrived at the mansion. She listened carefully as Annie described years of threats, intimidation, and control. Hayes never interrupted. When Annie finished, the detective simply asked, "Do you want to press charges?" Annie hesitated. Marcus had spent years convincing her that no one would believe her. Nathaniel quietly spoke. "The decision is yours. No one will force you." Annie looked at Hayes, then at Nathaniel, then at Evelyn. For the first time, she realized she wasn't alone. "Yes, I want him to answer for what he did." Hayes nodded. "Then we'll make sure he does." Meanwhile, officers reviewed the estate's security footage. The video showed Marcus entering through the service gate without permission, also revealed something unexpected. Carl Jensen unlocking the gate moments earlier. Hayes paused the footage. "Who's that?" Nathaniel's face hardened. "My head of security." Within hours, Carl was sitting across from Detective Hayes. At first, he denied everything. Then she placed bank records on the table. A recent $50,000 deposit. Marcus Reed. Carl's shoulders slumped. "I made a terrible mistake." "You betrayed more than your employer," Hayes replied. "You endangered a young woman's life." Carl quietly confessed. News of the confrontation spread quickly. By evening, local television stations were already reporting that an incident had occurred at Nathaniel Whitmore's estate. Marcus saw an opportunity. He uploaded a video to social media. His clothes were wrinkled, his voice cracked with fake emotion. "I'm just trying to protect Annie. She's confused. That billionaire is manipulating her." Within hours, the video had millions of views. The internet exploded. Some believed Marcus, others defended Nathaniel. Many attacked Annie without knowing a single fact. She became a headline instead of a person. The next morning, television vans lined the road outside the mansion. Reporters crowded the front gate. Camera flashes reflected off the melting snow. Annie peeked through the curtains. "They're here because of me." Evelyn gently closed the curtain. "They're here because controversy sells. Don't mistake noise for truth." Still, Annie couldn't stop trembling. "I've never had strangers hate me before." Evelyn wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "They don't know you. They only know a story." Inside the study, Daniel placed a prepared statement on Nathaniel's desk. "I've drafted something simple. It confirms she's safe. It avoids legal risk." Nathaniel read it silently, then laid it down. "It says nothing." "It says enough," Daniel replied. "It protects everyone." Nathaniel slowly shook his head. "It protects me. It doesn't protect Annie." Daniel looked at him carefully. "What are you planning?" Nathaniel walked to the window overlooking the crowd outside. For years, he had avoided cameras unless business required it. He hated public attention, but this was different. He turned back toward Daniel. If I stay silent, they'll believe Marcus, Daniel sighed. Then we'll do this properly. An hour later, the mansion doors opened. Nathaniel stepped outside beside Daniel. Reporters immediately surged toward the gate. Questions flew from every direction. Mr. Whitmore, did you kidnap this young woman? Is she living here illegally? Is Marcus Reed telling the truth? Daniel raised a hand. Mr. Whitmore will make one statement. There will be no questions afterward. Nathaniel stepped toward the microphones. His voice was calm, steady, powerful. Annie Carter is an 18-year-old young woman who came to my home seeking shelter during a dangerous winter storm. She is here by choice. She has never been held against her will. He paused, then looked directly into the cameras. Marcus Reed is not her guardian. He does not own her. No person owns another, simply because fear has kept them silent. The crowd grew quiet. Nathaniel continued, "We have provided law enforcement with security footage, witness statements, and evidence supporting Miss Carter's account. Mr. Reed unlawfully entered my property and assaulted her." Another reporter shouted, "Why involve yourself in someone else's problem?" Nathaniel didn't hesitate. "Because the night she knocked on my door, she wasn't asking for wealth. She was asking to survive." He looked toward the mansion, toward the window where he knew Annie was watching, and somewhere between helping her find safety. I remembered what it meant to be human again. Even Daniel looked surprised. Nathaniel wasn't reading prepared remarks anymore. He was speaking from the heart. He continued, "Being poor does not make someone dishonest. Being black does not make someone suspicious. Being frightened does not make someone weak. Miss Carter deserves the same dignity every human being deserves." Inside the house, tears filled Annie's eyes. For the first time in her life, someone with power had chosen to stand beside her instead of over her. The silence outside lasted only a moment. Then a familiar voice screamed from behind the crowd, "Liar!" Marcus Reed pushed through the reporters, pointing toward the mansion. "Annie, come out here. Tell them the truth." Officers moved immediately. Marcus shoved one of them away. "She belongs with me." Detective Laura Hayes stepped forward. "No, she never did." She grabbed Marcus's arm. "Marcus Reed, you are under arrest for trespassing, assault, extortion, witness intimidation, and related charges." As officers placed him in handcuffs, Marcus struggled wildly. "You'll throw her away." "They always do." Inside the mansion, Annie heard every word. For a moment, the old fear returned. Then Nathaniel walked back through the front door. He looked directly at her, and quietly said, "Not this time." Annie broke down in tears. She realized she finally believed him. The mansion grew quieter after Marcus was taken away. The television crews eventually packed their cameras and left. The reporters moved on to the next headline. The snow around the driveway slowly melted, but inside Annie's heart, the fear remained. She no longer feared Marcus. She feared becoming a burden. Every morning she woke before sunrise, cleaned her room, helped Evelyn in the kitchen, folded laundry, and looked for anything that needed to be done. Whenever Nathaniel thanked her, she answered the same way. "It's the least I can do." One afternoon, Evelyn watched Annie scrubbing a perfectly clean plate for nearly a minute. "Baby," she said gently, "that plate surrendered 5 minutes ago." Annie laughed softly but kept washing. "If I stay busy," she admitted, "I don't think." Nathaniel had overheard the conversation. Later that evening, he found Annie sitting alone in the small sitting room overlooking the snow-covered garden. A fire burned quietly in the fireplace. He took the chair across from her. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Nathaniel asked, "Are you planning to leave?" Annie looked surprised. "My backpack is packed," she sighed. "I wasn't going to sneak away. I was going to leave after breakfast." "Why?" She stared into the fire. "Because people are always kind in the beginning." Nathaniel listened without interrupting. "They tell you to stay as long as you need," Annie continued. "Then one day you notice they're tired of you. They sigh when you walk into the room. They remind you how much you've cost them. They stop seeing you as family and start seeing you as a responsibility." Her voice broke. "I don't want to wait for that day." Nathaniel looked at the flames dancing in the fireplace. "I've made many mistakes in my life. But letting you into this house isn't one of them. Annie looked at him, tears filling her eyes. You don't have to earn your place here. She smiled sadly. I don't know how to live without earning it. Nathaniel understood that better than she realized. For years he had measured his own worth by business success, wealth, and responsibility. After losing his wife Eleanor and his daughter Grace, he had buried himself in work because it felt easier than grieving. Now Annie had reminded him that people needed more than success. They needed each other. After a long silence, Nathaniel spoke again. Daniel mentioned something a few days ago. I dismissed it immediately. Annie looked up. What was it? He took a slow breath. He reminded me that adult adoption is legal in Connecticut. Annie blinked. Nathaniel continued carefully. I'm not trying to replace your mother. No one ever could. And I don't expect you to change your life for me. But when Marcus grabbed you, he paused. The first word that came into my mind was daughter. Annie covered her mouth. I've spent days asking myself why. I finally found the answer. Because that's how I already think of you. The room became perfectly still. Nathaniel looked directly into her eyes. If you choose to become part of this family, I would be honored. Tears streamed down Annie's face. What if I disappoint you? Nathaniel smiled for the first time in days. You already gave this house something I thought was gone forever. Hope. You don't have to earn anything else. At that moment, Evelyn appeared in the doorway carrying a folded blanket. She looked from Nathaniel to Annie. I assume I'm interrupting something important. Nathaniel smiled. You've probably been listening. I prefer the term supervising, Evelyn replied. The three of them laughed together. For the first time, it sounded like a family. Several weeks later, Annie stood inside a Connecticut courtroom wearing a navy blue dress Evelyn had chosen for her. Nathaniel stood beside her. Daniel sat nearby with the final paperwork. Detective Laura Hayes occupied the front row, smiling proudly. Marcus Reed remained in jail awaiting trial. Carl Jensen had accepted responsibility for his actions and agreed to testify. The judge adjusted his glasses before looking at Annie. Miss Carter, do you understand that this adoption is entirely your choice? Yes, Your Honor. And is this what you want? Annie turned toward Nathaniel. He gave the smallest nod. No pressure. No expectations. Only love. She smiled through tears. Yes. It means I don't have to face the world alone anymore. The judge smiled warmly. Then this court is honored to grant your request. He signed the papers. The quiet sound of his pen seemed to echo through the courtroom. It is my pleasure to declare you family. Nathaniel quietly wiped away a tear. Evelyn gave up pretending she wasn't crying. Daniel suddenly found the paperwork extremely interesting. Detective Hayes smiled to herself. After the hearing, the judge asked one final question. Would you like to keep your current name? Annie answered without hesitation. My mother gave me the name Carter. I'll always keep it. She looked at Nathaniel. But I'd also like to carry the name of the man who gave me another chance. She smiled. My name is Annie Carter Whitmore. Nathaniel closed his eyes for a moment. It was the greatest honor he had ever received. 1 year later, the Whitmore mansion had changed. The once silent halls were now filled with laughter. Grace's bedroom remained untouched, but fresh flowers sat beside her photograph every Friday. Not to erase grief, but to honor it. Nathaniel had transformed part of his fortune into Grace Whitmore House, a network of shelters for young women escaping abuse, violence, and homelessness. Daniel handled the legal work. Detective Hayes trained volunteers on how to support survivors with dignity. Evelyn supervised the kitchens, insisting that every guest receive a hot meal before filling out a single form. Nobody thinks clearly on an empty stomach, she often said. Annie loved that rule. She had added one of her own. No one leaves hungry. She had also enrolled in culinary school. Every weekend she experimented with new recipes, turning the mansion's once quiet kitchen into the happiest room in the house. Nathaniel complained whenever she made him taste something unusual. She ignored him every time. On Christmas Eve, snow began falling once again. The dining room table was full. Nathaniel, Annie, Evelyn, Daniel, Detective Hayes, several staff members, and a few young women from Grace Whitmore House who had nowhere else to celebrate. The meal wasn't extravagant: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, macaroni and cheese, warm rolls, peach cobbler, and one small pot of tomato soup. Nathaniel smiled when he saw it. Tomato soup? Annie nodded. My mother used to make it when money was tight. I promised I'd never forget where we started. Nathaniel tasted it. It might be the best thing on the table. Evelyn laughed. Don't let her hear that. She'll start charging us. Everyone laughed. After dinner, Annie picked up a wooden sign she had secretly ordered with money from her first internship at a local bakery. She carried it to the front gate. Nathaniel followed. Together, they fastened it beside the entrance. The sign read, "No one who comes here cold will be turned away." They stepped back to admire it. Snowflakes drifted softly around them. Annie leaned against Nathaniel's shoulder. You remember the night I knocked on your door? She asked. I remember every detail. I thought I was asking for a place to stay, Nathaniel smiled, and I thought I was saving your life. She looked up at him. We were both wrong. He raised an eyebrow. Weren't we? Annie shook her head. You gave me a family. Nathaniel looked toward the warm lights shining from the mansion. No. You gave this house a reason to become a home. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Behind them, laughter spilled through the open front door. Ahead of them, snow covered the quiet road. The mansion was still grand. It still carried memories of loss, but it no longer felt empty. It had become a place where broken people could begin again. And for every frightened young person who would one day walk through those gates, cold, hungry, and unsure if they deserved kindness, the sign would quietly answer before anyone else could. Come in. You are not trouble. You are family. Some people spend their whole lives believing that strength comes from money, power, or the ability to stand alone. But this story reminds us that true strength is found in compassion, courage, and the willingness to open a door when someone else has nowhere left to go. Nathaniel believed he was rescuing Annie from the cold, yet in the end, Annie rescued him from a life that had been frozen by grief. Together, they proved that family isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one that chooses you when you need it most. If this story touched your heart, let it be a reminder that one act of kindness can change two lives forever. You never know whose future you're changing simply by believing them, standing beside them, or giving them a second chance. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another unforgettable story of hope, justice, redemption, and unexpected family. Finally, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you were Nathaniel, would you have opened your door to Annie that snowy night? And what would you have done when Marcus showed up? Thank you for watching, and until our next story, remember, a house is built with wealth, but a home is built with love.